Hello, everyone. Hello, Lowell, and welcome to Recovery Matters. This is a show of Lowell House, and Lowell House deals with recovery. Lowell House deals with the opioid crisis we're going through, and we've been here for 45 years. We have decided to talk about some very compelling topics that we think we need to air to the public, and we've got some very interesting guests. Now, in the weeks ahead, we will have a show called Everyone Knows Someone to talk a little bit about how widespread addiction is between relatives and friends and neighbors and other people we know. And we'll have another one that will help people understand when they're addicted to a substance and when they're not addicted to a substance. It's a question we get asked very frequently at Lowell House. But I do want to introduce my guest and tell you about our topic today. And our topic today is, what if I found drugs in my child's room? What's the next step? What do I do? Where do I go? And many of us have had this experience in the past, and we've got some people here, I think, that can help us answer that question and can talk a little bit about their experience and what kinds of things they can do. And I'm also welcoming my co-host, Barbara Dunsford, who's the Director of Development at Lowell House. Hello, Barbara.
Thank you, Bill.
Great to have you here.
Great to be here.
And we have two very special guests, an old friend, Maria Rosario, who is now the Program Director at the Tewksbury Police Department, do lots of good things. What do you do at the Tewksbury Police Department, Maria?
Well, I work on a grant, it's called SAPSI, Substance Abuse Prevention Collaborative, and we're helping concentrate on the prevention piece of it so that the kids that are not quite into the trouble yet, we're trying to prevent them from getting there. So we deal with underage drinking and other drugs, as well as the opiates as well. So it's kind of a comprehensive overall approach now.
And you have this wonderful background. You were in the Lowell Health Department for several years. That's where I got to know you. We miss you.
Quite a while, huh?
And did a wonderful job in the MOPSI grant and a lot of the prevention and young people stuff. And that's what we want to talk about today. What about our teenagers, and what about when we find out they're beginning to experiment? And we will find a lot of them are experimenting with drugs.
Right.
The other person I have here is a more recent friend, Melissa Wexner, and Melissa is a parent and has done a wonderful book. I'll show you her books. And they're really about her daughter who passed away a few years ago, and her experience in dealing with addiction and addiction issues. She is an educator and she does wonderful presentations. She's reached, at this point, 16,000?
Almost 17.
Almost 17,000 adolescents and parents and children and people in the community, and does wonderful presentations. And I think has a great perspective on what to do if I find my child is using drugs. And I hope you'll share some of that experience with us too. So we're very happy. And the books are It's Not Going to Be an Addiction and Heroin's Puppet. Well done. So let's begin. I'll tell you a little story that I had a couple of years ago that I kind of thought of with this topic. Sitting with our family and our daughter and some friends, and one of the friends, my daughter is 37 now, was about 35 then, and one of the friends asked if I would like a little whiskey and with some ice. So I thought of a big jug I had gotten years ago. Not being a very big drinker, I figured it's full. We never touched it. So I went in there and picked up the jug. It's empty.
Empty, wow.
Empty. So I looked at my daughter and I said, Em, did you do this? And she said, Dad, it must have evaporated. And I said, well, look, now you're 35. What do you got to lose? Tell me. And she said, well, I want to tell you. That jug gave my friends and I some very happy nights when they were over here when we were teenagers. And she said, but we didn't drive. We didn't do anything crazy. We just were kind of experimenting. And I thought, what if I had found that when she was 15 or 16 or 17? What if I had found something worse? What if I had found marijuana under her mattress? What if I found heroin or cocaine? And I think it's different when you see it in retrospect and your child is 35 or 40 and sort of past that experimental stage. So maybe we begin by talking about why do adolescents use drugs? And if you find something, what do you do? Maria, why don't you
Well, I just actually finished my assessment phase for the grant that I'm on. And I talked with many young teens, and they would tell me that they would begin experimenting around age 12 was probably about the average that we got. And although they didn't know the words mental health, they would say, I'm depressed, I have a lot of stress going on in school, there's just so much going on. Maybe they didn't have a good home, maybe their parents were divorced, all the way up to somebody who has been sexually assaulted. So a lot of times kids experiment, and to me I have a couple groups of people. I have the kids that are not doing anything yet. I have the kids that I call at the crossroads because they are experimenting. And is it just an experiment, or are they trying to self-medicate? Are they trying to get rid of or numb themselves? And then of course we have the third group of people that have already are really deep into addiction. And that's what they told me. And when I spoke with people who are in recovery at Lowell House, at a couple other facilities, and also incarcerated, ironically, they told me the exact same thing. Now, they knew the words mental health because, of course, they were going through treatment. And they said almost the exact same thing: stress, depression, pressure, trauma. And their average age was between 12 and 14 as well. So it was really scary to see two different groups of people that have never talked to each other, totally different ends of the spectrum of their life, saying pretty much the same thing.
Wow. Well, the recent information from NIDA, National Institute of Drug Abuse, says that 68% of 7th graders surveyed said the use of marijuana is not bad and it's not a drug.
They think it's legal.
Yeah, absolutely. And in certain places in this country it is. And I think there'll be a referendum question in this state. However, we know how dangerous marijuana can be, both as a portal drug and as a drug in itself. So kids experiment. Why does one kid get addicted? People ask us this all the time. Why does my child suddenly become addicted? And we know there are other people that experiment a little bit, say, nah, that's not for me, or I'll try it a little bit, there's some peer pressure, and nothing ever happens. Melissa, what's your perspective on that?
Much of my perspective comes from hearing Dr. Ruth Pote speak. She is a family physician in Greenfield, Mass., who's also board certified in addiction medicine. So she's dealing with people from newborns to in their hundreds. But she'll explain that addiction occurs because of 3 drivers: the genetic factor, early use, and trauma.
Oh, okay.
And it's now believed that about 50% of the predisposition toward addiction is genetic, whether or not people in the family are talking about it. So that's one reason it's so important for parents to make their kids aware of family risk factors. The other is early use, because we know with the developing teen brain, it's changing so rapidly that it's extremely susceptible to the influence of outside substances. When I'm speaking with kids, and I just mentioned this to the 9th graders at Lowell High School on Friday, it's as if you were running down the sidewalk and you tripped. Well, maybe you'll break a bone, get a concussion, get badly scraped. If you're walking, maybe you'll trip and fracture your kneecap, but not suffer something so catastrophic. Well, they need to think about their brains that way when they are developing so quickly, both the pruning that's happening and the neural pathways that are being formed, the high transmission pathways. It's very vulnerable to outside substances. And just because they can't see the brain doesn't mean they can't hurt it.
Right.
And so having the neuroscience education both for kids and parents is really important. And I think one of the reasons that we've seen cigarette smoking drop to the lowest level historically among teens is because kids think it's gross. I wouldn't want to smoke a cigarette.
It's not cool anymore, is it?
Yeah, exactly. But a different perception with the marijuana. So there's the genetics, the early use, and then trauma. And as Maria was saying, trauma can come from abuse or neglect or household dysfunction. And what the studies are showing is that adults who underwent trauma as a child, if it hasn't been resolved, that puts them at much increased risk of health effects later, including pre-medication, self-medication.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And of course the interesting thing is that's a period of time, especially in 9th graders, where the brain isn't fully developed and the judgment's not so good. But the brain does learn a lot. So the brain can learn a lot about addiction at that age. Do you find a difference when you talk, because I know you talk to so many age groups, when you talk to 9th graders versus, college students? Do you find a difference in terms of their attitude and their perspective on things? You do the same thing too, Maria. I'd love to hear both of you comment on that.
Yeah, I think the younger kids tend to be a little bit more open to hearing this, a little more open to the science. I think more of the older kids have already formed their views. They're in different peer groups. And I think we also find that parents tend to normalize use more among older kids. I think there have been studies that have come out and said, gee, if my 8th grader were smoking marijuana, I'd be all on them. But, 12th grader, it's a rite of passage. And I think this rite of passage idea is really, really dangerous, given what we now know about neuroscience and what we also know about the increased potency, not just of the alcohol, but of the marijuana as well. So it's much riskier than it was a generation ago.
And that's what I found too when I was doing my assessment. It's a rites of passage. With the athletes, it's kind of a reward for a job well done. I have parents that would say to me, "Oh, my son or daughter is in sports. I'm good." And well, actually, you're not. You're at an even higher risk because not only do athletes have the risk of the normal, what I'll call normal experimenting and everything that we're talking about now. Now they have the chance that they could get hurt. And they could go on an opiate for a legitimate reason.
Yep.
I've had one parent that at one point said to me they had their children's wisdom teeth taken out. And she said, when I had my wisdom teeth taken out, I only needed 1 or 2 of the prescription medications. But my son, my God, he went through the whole bottle. So I thought, well, his tolerance is different. He's young. It really hurts. I didn't know then that he only needed 1 or 2. And in the 3rd, the 4th one, he was starting to get high. Yeah. So, the prescription says take 1 every 4 to 6 hours. People need to understand what that's doing to that brain.
Yeah. Right.
And when I'm talking, I often say in a simple way, when the brain is developing, those chemicals that they put in their bodies, it's actually creating, for lack of better words, in a very simple way to explain it, a pathway. Yeah. So the brain says, oh, I need this chemical to survive as I'm developing, so let's make a pathway. And that's why when people at much older are trying to go into recovery, as you know, it becomes very difficult because their brain and their body feels as though it's a chemical that they need.
Right.
And the older kids, it's a rites of passage. I can do it. My parents did it. I'm almost 21.
And their brain receptors never really recover fully. So, and that makes addiction a lifelong disease. So, and the earlier a person starts, the more difficult that is.
Right, the statistic is that among adult people with addiction who have survived to that point, half of them are using by the time they were 15 and 90% by the time they were 18. So addiction is really a pediatric developmental disease, and that's why parents really need to make sure that they are on board with their pediatrician. That pediatrician is an ally, and talk with them early on to make sure that when the kid starts developing, the pediatrician is going to be watching for things and can partner with the parents for the kid's overall health.
Absolutely.
So Melissa and Maria, pediatricians, what's the age that this education and this prevention should start?
Well, the American Academy of Pediatrics actually came out in 2011 recommending that all pediatricians screen all children who come in for either well visits or acute care visits starting at age 11. And the NIAAA, National Institute of Alcohol Abuse and Alcoholism, has recently recommended that children as young as 9 be screened for alcohol. And when I've been sharing my daughter's story, I've heard of children who started drinking as young as the age of 7. And when Dr. Pote has gone into a prison setting, she asked people to raise their hands, and were you using by 15? Most of the hands were up. 14, put your hand down. She said there was still a hand up at age 6. So a lot of people think, my kid should be playing with trucks or Legos at ages 6 and 7. They shouldn't be doing this. But again, if there's some kind of a trauma, maybe a stepdad that is not treating the kid well, and there's open liquor hidden in a closet, the kids can find that and they can get into trouble really quickly. And we're not even talking about huge amounts of substances that can start throwing things awry. It can be as little as the equivalent of 2 drinks a week.
So let's continue on that topic, because this is a very important part, and I'm sure a lot of our listeners out there really want to, at least I hope we have a lot of listeners out there, will hopefully be asking the same question in their minds, because we've been hearing this now a while. It begins to feel like we're losing the battle a little bit. We're not doing a great job in prevention. So the question is now, I'm a parent and I've gone into my child's room and I've found this substance in their room. What do I do now? Where do I go? What do I do? And maybe I'll also comment a little bit on what every parent can do in terms of the things they need to have communicated to their children, communicated to their friends and family members, and how they can begin to use the resources we have.
I think one thing that's really important is that knowledge is power, and we're chasing a moving target, and that every parent owes it to themselves and their children to attend at least one continuing education event per year so that they know what the trends are and what the risks are in their community. There's a traveling demo called In Plain Sight, which is a mock-up of a teen's bedroom. And how
I've heard about that.
Yeah, where paraphernalia can be hidden. You know, you see something that looks like a Coke can, has the weight of a Coke can, but it's really a grinder. Or the presence of Q-tips, or a highlighter that's actually a marijuana pipe. And I make a point of attending In Plain Sight as often as I can, because the way marijuana paraphernalia is being marketed to kids, there is always something to learn. So parents need to, first of all, make sure they've got the knowledge.
And can recognize what that paraphernalia is.
Right.
Because I'm not sure a lot of parents, including me, would even recognize
because
it.
It looks just like the regulars of the highlighters. And then the other thing is becoming educated on the neuroscience. So here I'd like to make a plug for a program that's out of Children's Hospital.
Yes.
It's www.teen-safe.org. And it's a free series of 8 videos. They're about 2 minutes each. And they educate parents about the basic neuroscience.
That's great.
Yep, and prevention strategies. And there's a wonderful FAQ section on it with things like, but I want to be a cool parent. So Dr. Knight addresses that. What if I find drugs in my kid's room? Dr. Knight addresses that. What if, or should I drug test my kid? So I would recommend all parents to take a look at these videos, and again, watch them once a year to refresh what they know about the neuroscience and what's out there.
Now, we're gonna put this on our website. On the it's Lowell House, www.lowellhouse Inc. It's hard getting that W out. www.lowellhouseinc.org. And we will put this on. I don't know whether you can see it from there, but again, we'll repeat it. It's www.teen-safe.org, but we'll have it on our website, so go and look at it.
Yeah.
Education with teens especially, but with all family members, is really power at this point, and the ability to be able to do that.
Yeah.
So, Maria, now I've found it. I'm a parent. I don't know what to do. I mean, do I confront my child? Do I yell at them? Do I tell them if they do this, they're grounded for a month? What do I do now?
Well, I think what's important is the conversations that you have with your children. And I actually go around and I have an In Plain Sight presentation that I do. The key thing for me about the Hidden in Plain Sight is I never want a parent who has come into it for the first time to say, you know what, I'm going to run home and I'm going to search my child's room. Because if you have a child who is not experimenting yet, or at the crossroads, as I mentioned before, that little break of trust could be just enough to push them over the edge.
Oh.
Now, if you found something already, and I'll talk about that in a second, that might be a different story. So when I do Hidden in Plain Sight, a parent will come up to me and I will ask them, how old is your child? And if they say to me, Mom, my daughter's 16, I know she's using opiates. I know she is. I'll have her go walk around the room. And then we'll talk about the things, and I'll tell them. Parents will tell me, pieces of foil were missing, or my Q-tips were missing, or things that somebody who is deep in the throes of addiction and heroin would be missing. If a parent comes up to me and says, well, I'm here, I want to be educated, my daughter is 6 or 7 or 9 or 10, then I encourage them to begin the conversation as early as possible. It's never too young. It has to be age appropriate. We have one display where is it candy or is it medicine? And we have little kids that come up and they get a kick out of saying, well, that looks like candy or that looks like medicine, but you're just teaching them that you don't know what the difference is, so you never want to put something in your mouth. You never want to take something from a parent or an adult that's not one of your trusted adults. So if a parent finds something, to me, and we may or may not have the same opinion, what was it that they found? And talk to the child about it. There's going to be a point where, unfortunately, talking might not always work because they're so far down the road. But a lot of times, people that are in recovery, and I'm sure you've heard this before, or people that I've talked to that are in the depth of using, believe that people don't care about them. They believe that no one trusts them. They might have given them reason not to be trusted, But in the beginning stages, to have someone to talk to, and I would just tell a parent, never give up trying to talk to that child, and hit it head on. Don't say, oh, well, this is alcohol. Oh, no, that's not alcohol. I'm wrong. You know, no denial. You really have to hit it head on. You know, addiction is a disease, and the denial is what's really hurting people, because everybody says, you have your program, the first time I think I met you was, not me, not my child. And I can't think of words that are even stronger than that. The conversation is the biggest. And if you found something like foil or something that indicates, my goodness, they're a little bit deeper into addiction than I want, reach out for help. There's no shame in doing that.
And the point about the conversation is just to acknowledge the reality that these conversations can be hard, and you as a parent can be in shock. And one of my favorite online resources is from www.drugabuse.gov. They have something called the Family-Checkup. And those are 5 videos that are scenarios of parents and their children showing examples of healthy conversations and unhealthy. So it's just so interesting to see somebody, you know, confronting their kid in an angry way when they're reading the newspaper is the bad example, and then the good example, putting down the newspaper, looking them in the eye, brainstorming solutions. So I think one of my difficulties with my daughter was imagining, how do you have these conversations? That's not something you learn in school.
That's right.
But these drugabuse.gov family checkup videos, I think, are wonderful to give models for conversations. And maybe someone say, oh, I'd never say that, but oh, maybe I could say that.
Yeah, it's interesting. We hear a couple of universal things from people who are addicted for long periods of time. One is that they don't think much of themselves and they have very poor self-image, but they also think people don't care and they're very ashamed of what they're doing. So for a lot of them, this isn't what people think of, getting high and having fun and going to parties. It's a very difficult piece for them. And the other thing is they don't know where to go and they don't know what kind of resources. We're doing an overdose program in the community called Project Co-op, which is a very nice program, which our case manager and one of the police department people follow up on all the overdoses in the city.
That's great.
And I think probably 50 to 60% have said to us, we're so glad you're here because we don't know what to do. We're just in this track. We continue. We have a life that's just filled with finding drugs, using drugs, finding drugs, using drugs. And we've already been able to get a number of people into detox and to recovery programs. So
That's
I think
great.
it works well, but we don't want to have to do that on the other end because it's much more difficult being 28 or 30 or 35 and using drugs heavily. So I think it's very important what you both said, and Melissa, we definitely want that resource list you have. We want to get it on. But let's talk about resources, because now I'm a parent. I found, my son or daughter has come to me and said, look, I think I'm using something and I might be in trouble here, and trust you enough to say that. What do you do? Who do you call?
Well, I mean, we have a set of resources books I wish I would have brought with me. I don't know the number off the top of my head, the 1-800-HELP number. One of the first places you could call would be go to Learn to Cope.
Yes.
And that webpage
Our friend
is,
Joanne Peterson.
Yeah, wonderful, wonderful, wonderful group of people.
Yes.
What's great about that organization is that everybody in that room, it's a peer support group, so everybody in that room has been somewhere along the line as to where this person is. And that webpage is www.learn2cope.org.
And these are parents really learning from other parents.
Yes.
Correct. And they have a list of resources that they can provide you. A lot of police stations, I know in Tewksbury, if somebody needs help, all they have to do is reach out to us. And we do our very best to find a bed. It depends on what they're looking for. There's outpatients programs like yourself. There's inpatient programs. Where there's mental health that needs to be taken into consideration. But Learn to Cope is a good place to start.
Yes.
Because not only is the parent or the person who's trying to help the individual getting help, because if you don't help yourself, you can't help someone else.
Right.
But they're able to be able to push down a road that gives them the resources they need.
And I should mention, www, I'm getting good at this, learntocope.org.
Right, and it's the number 2cope.org.
Right. Number 2, thank you. And again, this will be on our resource list on the Lowell House site. So please go to that, and we'll try and include some of these other resources in. Melissa, what else? What would I do? Who would I call?
It depends on your family, your culture, the
Yeah.
particular situation, but some people may be comfortable calling their pediatrician. And the movie that was filmed in Tingsboro, If Only, by
Yes, wonderful
by
film.
Jim
Jim
Wahlberg, that shows a wonderful scenario about a mom who's concerned about her son, talking to the pediatrician, and he takes her seriously, has his son drug tested. It was positive for marijuana and opiates. He gets into treatment. That movie is available for free download. It's 32 minutes, www.dropthemoff.com. And that's a great education, and there's a whole website around that with resources on it as well.
Great, thank you so much. Thank you both. This has been terrific and a lot of good information. So don't forget our website, www.lowellhouseinc.org. And what do we have coming up?
Well, we have an open house of our newly relocated men's recovery home in Tewksbury. It's going to be on April 28th, 4 to 6 o'clock. We invite the public to come out and see the facility. It's brand spanking new. It's awesome, and you'll get a lot more information on the men's recovery house at that particular event. So
Thank you all. We'll see you next time. And don't forget, recovery matters and treatment works. Thank you all very much.
Thank you.
thank you.
Thank you.